State and federal leaders continue to search for new ways to mitigate rising global temperatures. Much of that discussion has been focused on carbon. Over the past few years, carbon markets have emerged, giving ag producers who implement certain management practices the ability to profit. However, there is still a lot to learn about the newly emerging carbon market industry. In order to help make sense of this new frontier, the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources recently hosted the Carbon Agriculture Summit. The day-long event was held on UNL's East Campus in the Union in the Great Plains Room and continued to build on the conversations that took place during last year's Soil Health Summit. The event blended presentations on the elements and functions of healthy soils with participant discussions on conservation strategies and best producer practices.
Yeah, so last year's conversation was around soil health. We were coming out of a legislative session where there was a soil health task force. So there was a lot of interest in that. And then with the change in administration in DC, that pivoted over to carbon and carbon markets. And so this year's conversation is really about demystifying carbon, understanding all the different forms carbon takes, really understanding the cycling of carbon, both in cropping systems, but in livestock systems, everything from the ranch to the feedlot and everything in between. So,
while the summit helped attendees learn about the various forms of carbon, this particular event was intended to understand the intricacies of carbon markets and what that could potentially mean for producers in Nebraska.
We could spend a lot of time talking about carbon, and some of the speakers today are talking about the different versions of carbon. But what we're really dialing in is kind of the living carbon, if you will. So everything from the plants and the animals. 20% of our body is made up of carbon, if you will. Plants have a lot of carbon. The carbon sometimes is in the form of simple sugars, sometimes it's in more complicated carbohydrates like cellulose, or when corn stalk resists lodging, it stands up for combining, that's lignocellulose. But as those plants grow and then they die, they release that carbon to the fauna, so earthworms and insects that break that down, eat it, move it around, and then the microbes, the fungi, the bacteria, they break it down into the essential basic building blocks. And some of that, as they're chewing up the organic matter, if you will, is released back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide, which then cycles through the atmosphere, taken back up by plants, fixed back into these carbohydrates, the cellulose, back into the soil, and we have this virtuous cycle. And today is really trying to bring people together for a discussion around carbon in all of its forms. And yes, at the end of the day, understanding the complexities of carbon in markets and what that means for our producers is part of that.
Homer Buell of the Shovel Dot Ranch was one of the panelists. For nearly 130 years, the Buell family has been doing business in the Nebraska Sandhills, all while caring for the land, water, and wildlife. The Buells continue the family commitment to conservation today. However, as Homer puts it, when it comes to conservation efforts, it might take a bit of a mind shift to put your focus in the right place.
When I got out of college and I took over, we had a seed stock herd, Herefords, and I was much more in tune to what I tell people, looking out. I didn't look down. I was always looking at the cattle, evaluating the cattle, seeing whether we were getting things right done in that way. And that was good in a lot of ways, but I wasn't looking down enough and seeing what's down there in the soil and the plants. And I think it was just a mind shift that I had, that I really came to understand that on our ranch, the biggest resource that we manage is the grass and the whole water cycle and all that. So an understanding of that really changed my mindset and how I looked at managing the ranch and what was most important.
Now, if you weren't able to attend this conference, but you'd like to see what you missed, event organizers have posted the entire Carbon Credit Summit online for you to watch at your convenience. We've posted a link to the summit videos along with this story. You can find them on the Market Journal website.